In today's episode of the Dr. Mollie James Show, I have Reeve Swainstrom, who is joining us. He's a retired Marine officer who became a federal prosecutor, and his son was in the military and suffered a COVID-19 vaccine injury. So he's going to share with us his journey, his son's journey, and what that has meant to his future. So thanks for tuning in. So I want to welcome Reeve Swainstrom to the podcast today. He is a retired Marine out of the 0331, went on to be a federal prosecutor. And I invited him on today because I saw a tweet about his son. And I've talked a lot about the vaccines, the so-called vaccines in the military. And his post just got my heart. So Reeve, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here, Doc.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We're going to get to your service history and all of that. But first of all, let's start out with give us a little background on your son and what happened with him in the military and what's he doing now?
All right. So his name is Wesley, and he grew up right here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. An extraordinary kid. He was a preemie by a little more than 2 months, spent the first 6 weeks of his life in the NICU. And growing up, he had a really severe learning disability, really didn't get to grade level until really couldn't even read at the pre-K level till around 3rd, 4th grade. And was struggled through special ed throughout all of his elementary, middle school, high school career, but had a work ethic like nothing you could ever even imagine. Just an incredibly dedicated, hardworking kid. And by around 11th grade or so, things just began to click, and he pushed his way out of the special ed arena and started to dream big. And that's when he started thinking that he wanted to carry on a tradition in our family. We have, over the last 100 years or so, something like 8 Marines and a few in the Army, a couple in the Air Force, but mostly Marines in our family. And no one had ever been an officer in our family, including me. I joined the Marines at 17, knowing I'd never go to college. It just wasn't ever even discussed in my family when I was growing up. And, thankfully I later became a GI Bill lawyer, but that's another story. He worked hard. He went to, he left New Mexico, went to Rutgers in New Jersey, and worked hard there, got a business and psychology degree. And but throughout that process, from I'd say around 16 to 21, he kept talking about wanting to be a Marine officer. And then he decided to really go big. And I just sat back and watched him navigate his way through this thought process. And one day he said, I think I want to be an aviator. I want to fly for my country. And I don't know if I can put it into perspective. Kids from Albuquerque, New Mexico don't get those kinds of contracts, especially kids with his history. Those are elite contracts in the military, especially in the Marines. The Marine Corps is 1/10 the size of the Army. It's just a very, very small organization, military organization, branch. And so I said, yeah, man, just go for it. Nothing. The only thing that can happen if you don't go for it is you don't get it. So go for it. And he just busted his ass. I mean, he just tore it up. And imagine the competition with like Harvard grads and, elite schools all compete for those contracts. Getting an aviation contract in the Marines is like a unicorn. We all know they exist. We just never see them, right? Mm-hmm. And he got it. And but the work he did, straight A's in school, He was running marathons, working on his body, just getting fit. Like, he was an absolute specimen, truly. Um, and, uh, and then he started running ultra marathons. He ran one in Texas. I went out to go watch him. It was the most boring 24 hours of my life. But it was a 100K
Oh, wow.
run. Just unbelievable. Broke his foot, and just would never give up. He finished the race. Just that's the kind of kid he is. He was, and now he's a young man, obviously, but he's now 28. So he got the contract against all odds, and set off to pursue a career as an aviator in the Marines. And then came Joe Biden's mandatory shots.
Yeah.
And,
So when did he get the aviator contract? What year was that? Do you remember
21.
roughly? Oh, 21. Okay.
Mhm.
So
20
right at the heart of when all that.
in 2020. Yeah, he got the contract a year before that. And then I don't remember the exact dates on when he went to officer candidate school. And then in the Marine Corps, they have another school called TBS, which is just the basic course, the basic school for officers. In the Marine Corps, everyone has to be infantry qualified. Basically, it doesn't matter if you're going to be a lawyer or an aviator. Every Marine is an infantryman first, and so for the officer side, they got to go through OCS and then the basic school, which I think it's about 4 months or so. So the officer candidate school is like 3 months, and then the basic school I think is about 4 months, something like that. It's intense, very, very intense. And yeah, so right around, it was 2021, about before the mandate came out.
Now, when applying for this position in this contract, I didn't realize, or I knew, but this is so specialized. The physical rigor needed to be an aviator in the military for certain positions. So, was his physical condition part of the requirements to get that contract?
Get this. So that's a great question. A lot of people don't realize how intense that part of it is. So before you can even sign on the dotted line and get a contract for the Marines at all, for an aviator, they send you to the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, Florida, which is where the Navy has its aviation school, and the Marines go to the Navy school because the Marine Corps is part of the Navy, subordinate to the Navy. And so in order to get this contract, they send you out before you can even sign any kind of contract at all. In order to get it, they send you to a week-long physical. Okay, so he went out there to Pensacola, a full week of physicals, and came back and with perfect health. Obviously, his vision was perfect, cardiovascular system superior. And passed with flying colors. He came back, and as soon as he came back, signed on the dotted line and secured his contract to become a Marine aviator. And then again, I don't know the exact details, but there's another physical after that to just make sure, before we spend millions and millions of dollars on you, that you're physically qualified and mentally qualified.
Yeah.
And he passed that as well. And then everything changed, as you know.
Yeah. So talk to us about that. So he's getting ready to launch. Did he start flying?
No.
He started that part of it?
No. So he was, while he was in the basic school, I think right before he got to the flight school, that's when the mandate came out. So we're probably talking weeks. The exact time frame, I don't know. So the mandate came out. He's in really intense training at the basic school. And he calls me and tells me, look, they ordered us to do this, and literally under threat. The coercion was just unimaginable. Threats of court martial, imprisonment, loss of rank, and for him, loss of his ability to become an aviator.
And I want to highlight that before we go on, because that's one of the key differences between military folks that were subject to the mandate and everybody else. And I didn't even appreciate that. I could quit my job. I could just leave and walk away. Other people could opt out. The military didn't have that option.
No. And the way they played it, the way they played it primarily was, look, this is the military. You don't own your own body. You don't own your own choices. You don't own your own decisions in life. We own it. And that's true. Right. It's just the way it is. And that's something that you have to accept when you go into the military. And so the way they played it, look, we've already injected you with every other thing imaginable. And that is also true. And this is no different. This is just another drug that you got to take in order to fulfill your obligations under your oath and your contract to be a Marine officer. And for officers in particular, it was really intense, especially young officers. He was a young baby second lieutenant at the time. At that time, 23, I think. So, the 99% of these young warriors did what they were told to do. And I remember distinctly talking to him about it because I was pouring my soul into this research because there was nothing available on this stuff. And it just happened so fast that my instincts were, look, just hold off. Look, you had COVID. I don't care what Fauci says. If you're exposed to a virus, my fourth grade biology, was you're going to develop some antibodies to it. So why do you need the vaccine if you've already had COVID and got through it fine? And it was nothing for him. Like a lot of people his age, young, healthy people, flew through it, some without even knowing they had it. So the Marines forced their troops primarily to get the Moderna shots. So I dug into the Moderna literature, whichever was available at the time in 2021. And, I learned the basic things. One is even Moderna said, you should not have this shot within 6 months of infection with COVID. That was their literature. He had it weeks before. And they also said you should not engage in any physical activity, especially strenuous activity, for at least, I think it was a week or two after the shot. I think it was 2 weeks. Of course, after both shots, they catapulted him out to the field for, a solid week or 10 days. And so everything that even Moderna said you shouldn't do, the Marine Corps completely ignored and did it anyway, even though it was a brand new experimental drug. And so he went out into the field after he was ordered to take the shot the first time for extremely strenuous activities. And he would tell me later on, I felt like I was going to die from a heart attack. That's when that began. And then, of course, a month later, they timed the shots between the most intense training at the basic school. And once again, shot straight to the field for more really intense training. Imagine like 5 straight days of marathons. That's the kind of training that you should try to envision to understand this. And so basically they did the opposite of what even the manufacturer said you should not do. And I think that those decisions were really consequential for him, especially since, look, nobody's ever going to admit in the military that these shots did anything, with some apparently very, very minor exceptions. There might be, I saw there was one woman who the military acknowledged that she was vaccine injured. But how do you go from perfect vision to having a permanent clot of some kind, I don't know what it is, in his eye that he sees every waking moment and every day. Even when he closes his eyes, he sees it. Only time he doesn't see it is when he's asleep. So all day long, every day, he's got something floating around in his eye. His vision was distorted and damaged. They call it ocular damage. And he's a 28-year-old with dangerously high blood pressure, and it has to be on blood pressure meds. He went from running ultra marathons for an entire year after these shots. When he got to the flight school, he would say, "I can barely walk around the block, and I'm just hiding it, because you didn't want to get kicked out of flight school." Went from a specimen of a man, just physical. Just his physiological accomplishments and appearance were the definition of a Marine. Like, you would hire a sculptor to sculpt that kind of body, and then gained weight because he couldn't function, he couldn't run, he couldn't PT anymore like he used to. He was waking up in the middle of the night feeling like he was having a heart attack for a solid year after these shots. In terms of timeline, so he got these shots, he did the training, and then he went from the basic school down to the flight school in Pensacola, and he was there for a couple of years. But that first year that he was there was a real struggle, and even with all that, he was doing really well on his exams, and excelling in flight school. And then eventually, unfortunately, he got called in for another physical, and that's when they discovered the ocular damage, high blood pressure, etc. And I'll never forgive the military for this. The flight surgeon who disqualified him literally said to him, "Look, you're disqualified. You'll never fly. Your vision is out of range," or whatever it is. And you now don't go kill yourself. It's just a job, kind of thing. And I don't know if anyone who hasn't been in that position fully understands the work, the commitment, the struggle to not only get such a privilege to be able to fly for your country, especially in the Marines, and then have it taken away from you at the snap of a finger in such a cruel way.
I don't think the average person who's not in the military or aviation understands the double physical requirements that converge on a military aviator. I've covered this before. I've had military pilots on talking about this. Tell me, did he try to resist this? Did he try to work with them? Did he try to get an exemption? Or did he just say, "I have to do this"?
No, to resist what? The shot or the disqualification? The shot? No, he didn't resist it.
Yeah.
The way it was explained, look, it was so new. The whole thing was so fast, and it was so new. And he, among everyone else in that demographic, had the unique reality that you can't just quit your job. You can't say, "I quit." In the military, especially in the Marines. And so I think there wasn't enough information at the time really about anything. These drugs were a mystery to everybody. I know there were some doctors on the periphery trying to say, "Let's hold off a little bit. Let's a little more time to research this." But the reality was, in his case, it's just another inoculation, and we're in the military, we got to get it, which basically is true. And but it wasn't just another one. That's how they played it. And combined with the most intense coercion, I think you could, outside of physical torture, I don't see anything more insidious in how is how the Marines specifically forced their troops to take these drugs. And I refuse to call them vaccines.
Yeah, I agree.
To
They're
me,
not.
they're just drugs posing as a vaccine.
Yeah.
And you know, it was just torture because we would see them in the press, the Faucis, even Biden, that dementia patient pretending to be a president, and all sorts of, you know, the CDC director, et cetera, coming out and saying it's safe and it's effective. And once you get it, you can never get COVID again.
Yeah.
And you can't spread it. The propaganda was like nothing we've ever seen in our country and in the world before.
Yeah, one of the things I hope we take from this is I hope people realize when a medical person makes a promise like that, that is propaganda, because nothing is certain and 100% in medicine ever. And no matter what you do, there's always going to be people who have harm from things. And so there always needs to be a degree of uncertainty. And I agree with you. The propaganda campaign on this was just insane. It's evil. And I've had military folks on that have tried to resist. They tried to go through the exemption process or decline it. And they went to counseling where they had to come in and basically individually be berated and coerced. And they had written statements in their file that they weren't following orders. And like you said, court martial. I was at Follow the Silenced recently with Doc Pete Chambers and Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long were both featured in that movie with the DMED database. And, you know, to take it a step further, they were whistleblowers who brought out these increases in blood clots and myocarditis and things. And then the DMED database all of a sudden changes overnight after that happens. So my question for you, and I ask most people who are aware of this sect of things or, you know, specific topic, do you think this was intentional sabotage of our military? Or do you think this was just unknown and oopsie?
There's like two Reeves who want to answer that question. One is the angry one, you know, who's offended that the institution I'm still proud that I served, the military branch that I'm still proud that I served, betrayed me by betraying my son. That Reeve is badly damaged. And, you know, that side of me could see, especially with everything that's coming out, and especially with I forget the name of that seminar, whatever that thing that they did. What was that big, like, plan? Like, we are going to have what was that? We're going to have a pandemic. And then a few months later, we had a pandemic. It was like this big seminar in New York or something.
Yeah. Event 201. Event 201.
Yeah. So, I mean, how does that happen? That's just crazy to me. And everything that they said they were going to do, they did. And then you had Fauci saying this president will have to deal with a pandemic. How does he know that? You know, I will. So that side of me thinks that that's possible in part because of what we talked about earlier. The military is different. You know, you don't get to say no to an order. And as you know, very few people had the courage and ability to say no. My son chose not to say no, mostly because he feared losing his dream. You know, it wasn't just court-martial, loss of rank, imprisonment. It was, you will never fly. All that work you put in to beat out the elite kids that come from more elite families than you grew up in, it's going to go away because you refuse to take, you know, a shot that's safe and effective. You're crazy.
Yeah.
And,
I don't know if you knew this. I don't know if you knew this, but pilots that didn't take the shot got grounded anyway. So even if they medically disqualified.
Yeah. Well, yeah, when you talk to Teresa Long, I've talked to her, and she explains that the aviation demographic itself was really, really hit hard by these shots.
Which makes sense with the rigorous physical requirements necessary. and how this affected people with their heart and their neurologic systems.
Yeah. And, the other thing is, too, some people, maybe it'll show up later, I don't know, but some of his fellow students didn't have, most of his fellow students didn't have a lot of these side effects. I don't know why my son had to be the one to have them, but that's what happened. And of course, there's no document from his record that says vaccine injured, but there's no other rational explanation for going from a physical specimen running ultra marathons to, after the shots, being unable to walk to the freaking mailbox.
No.
I mean, give me a break. And he had all of with the exception of the eye stuff, although Dr. Long says that's actually a pretty common side effect from these shots as well. She's seen a lot of that, similar consequences that he had in pilots for some reason. Now, well, that's her demographic, so she's seen it. I thought it was very rare, but she said no, it's something that she's seen.
Yeah.
But he got the most common side effect. I mean, even the Fauci's of the world and the CDC director, former CDC director, etc., finally had to at least acknowledge that especially young, healthy males were suffering from myocarditis and other heart-related consequences from these shots. They didn't at the time he had to take it. A year later, year and a half later, they were finally admitting it, but they wouldn't individualize that, and still won't.
Yeah, and even the more common thing I'm seeing than the myocarditis is the neurologic. So even something as, small, I'll call it small, but it's not if it's you, as numbness in the fingers or numbness in the feet. When you're flying an aircraft like that, that does not work.
No.
So, and the cost to train these aviators is insane. A regular military pilot, I've had a flight instructor on. The average is about $2 million. If you're looking at fighter pilots, you're looking at $9 to $10 million per aviator.
Easily, and there's continuity with that. The millions keep stacking throughout their career. This isn't something that you can just do in any kind of casual way. You're flying. In the case of his best friend is now flying the F-35. Is that right? The stealth fighter. I don't know.
Sure.
And
it sounds good.
I'm not an aviator. Anyway, that really cool one, and he is thriving, and they're still very close. That's what Wes lost. In some respects, he does two things. One is he tries to avoid contact with these guys because he knows that that's something he could be doing right now. But at the same time, he's really proud of his friends and maintains close contact. And I think, he's only just got out of the Marines, which allows me to be a little more free in my expression of disappointment with the military, even the new current DOD leadership. And I'm happy with most things, but there's one elephant in the room that has to be addressed. It's interesting that Pete Hegseth, along with the other leaders in the military, have done a good job of addressing the wrong with the people that refuse to take the shot. And I'm glad about that. The unfortunate reality, though, is they're completely ignoring those who were hurt or killed. And if you talk to Dr. Long, there's no ambiguity about it. Lots and lots and lots of people were hurt, and some were killed.
Yeah.
Why it is that they won't touch that, I don't know. I have theories. I mean, I know President Trump really feels that warp speed was a tremendous success and likes to, theorize that he saved many millions of lives through pushing that research so quickly. And maybe they don't want to counter that as a matter. Maybe it's a policy within this new administration that we're just not going to go out of our way to acknowledge the downside to these shots because of the success that they perceive in the program. And they do say, look, we had nothing to do with the mandates. We would have never mandated it. And there's the distinction. This should have been a choice. And maybe that's it. I don't know. I don't have any clue why it is that they won't at least acknowledge. And I've posted this a bunch of times trying to get their attention, and it just goes into the waste bin of, look, it's great that you're doing the right thing by those who are harmed by the decision to not take these drugs. What about those? What about those who did take them and were hurt and injured in a different way or killed?
Yeah.
And there's been nothing from DOD about that. Nothing, as far as I know. Literally nothing.
I suspect it's financial when it comes down to it. The cost of taking care of these injured people is going to be so high over their lifetimes. Nobody wants that. That's my suspicion. Ironically, Terry Adaram.
It has to be that part of that reason, because it's astronomical.
Yeah. So I just was reading that Terry Adaram, who was the assistant SecDef that signed the notorious paper, right? That said that we can take an EUA product and substitute it for an FDA product. So do you want to talk a little bit about this being an unlawful mandate?
Sure. I'm not a vaccine law expert. I was a federal prosecutor throughout my legal career, retired a couple years ago. So I'm really good at sending cartel members to federal prison. But I'm not great at a lot of other. My family calls me the most useless lawyer in anyone's family in history, because anytime they have 2 a.m. legal problems, I'm not the guy to call. I always give them a number to another lawyer they can call. But my understanding of this particular issue, and I've read a lot of other experts, subject matter experts on the issue, including former DOD personnel who declined to take the shot and did a really deep dive into the legal issues. She wrote a memo essentially saying that, I forget the name, I never pronounce it right, but Comirnaty. Yeah.
I don't know how to say it either, but just spit it out. Comirnaty.
Yeah. So Pfizer came out with this new drug that was FDA approved. And essentially the day that Pfizer finally got FDA approval for what they claimed was the emergency use drug that they were thrusting into the arms of everybody around the world. And so what she did, as I think one of the top medical officers in the military, she essentially said, Comirnaty is now FDA approved. The military can order its troops to take FDA-approved drugs. Comirnaty, unfortunately, doesn't exist and may never exist, but that's okay, because the drugs that we've been forcing you to take are identical to Comirnaty, and so there is no difference. It's a distinction without a difference. So you are now ordered to take the same drug that we've been ordering you to take, because the new drug that we are ordering you to take isn't available. There's legal ways to express that, but that is that's the 0331 version of what happened with that memo. And so once she wrote that memo, the Secretary of Defense issued the order, the mandate, and then that was it. They're off to the races. And by simply saying that this drug that is emergency use authorized is identical to the drug that's approved, a distinction without a difference, you are therefore ordered to take the one that's available, since the one that's approved isn't available. And that was it. That was the legal justification. Now, we've since learned, and it's in the literature, it's crystal clear that they are not identical, and there was no justification for anyone to say so.
Yeah. And I believe Dr. Terry Adaram just got fired, and apparently didn't take that well, and said that it was very hard on her future pursuit of her career to be dismissed from the Army in that way. And it was kind of an ironic statement.
I think she was in the CIA, or maybe transferred to the CIA. I don't know the details of it. But yeah, I guess she's filing defamation lawsuits against people. Bottom line is, either she is responsible for that truly infamous mischaracterization of both the law, as I understand it, and medicine, a bilateral catastrophe, and all of the injuries that came thereafter, or somebody or a group of people, or organizations, pharmaceutical companies, essentially made it so that she had to issue that memo. I'm more interested in that. I want to know what pressure there was. Well, I'll say if any, but I'm sure there was pressure from on high for her to do that equivalency memo, for her to issue that memo, stating that this drug is the same as the other drug, even though it isn't.
Yeah. Tell us about your service. You were in the Marine Corps.
Yeah. I just served for 4 years active and 3 years reserve, from 84 through essentially 93. And while I was a machine gunner. For a little while, I was stationed in Italy, where I was with a security detachment, and that was a great experience for me, because I was a very, very young boy, essentially 18 years old, and I got to become a member of a security team for a general in Italy. It was an Air Force general, but it was a NATO base, and so the Marines had security obligations for it, and he was really good to me. He kind of treated me like a son. And I grew up without a father. I never knew my own father. And so when, this strong, powerful man showed an interest in me, it meant something to me. And one day he told me, he said, "Reeve, you got a molecular brain cell structure. You might as well use it." And I'm like, I don't even know what the hell that means. And so, and what he said it meant was, he literally said, "I signed you up for a college class. You're going to take it." And I'm like, what? Yeah, this is the first time I felt like I was insubordinate to him, because at that time, a 2-star general, I was a corporal. And he says, because I said, like, "What, sir? I'm not going to college. No one in my family has gone to college. I don't understand what you're talking about." And he said something like, normally somebody with 2 stripes on their shoulder doesn't talk to somebody with 2 stars on their shoulder like that and get away with it. So I knew he was serious. And so I took the college class. Believe it or not, I took American history while stationed in Italy. Nice. And it was the first A I ever got. And of course, back then there was no internet, there was nothing like that. So it was a person in a classroom taking a college class. And I was there with a great demographic, a combination of kids who were in the high school, the Department of Defense high school that was nearby. And by age, they were my contemporaries, as well as, older people in the military who wanted to go back and get their degree. it was really good for me to do that. And long story short, I just never stopped. I just kept taking classes after classes after classes. And it's great in the military because they pay for it, you know. And back then, um, books weren't free, but he actually bought my books, and so I'm still excuse me, I'm still in touch with him. Um, so he changed my life. He changed the trajectory of my life, and I got out of the Marines, and didn't have a ton of undergrad work to do. I finished that off in a few years, and most of my classes transferred, not all of them, and eventually got my undergrad at the University of New Mexico, and then I walked across the street to the law school, and I pounded through law school in 2.5 years, and then I became a career federal prosecutor.
Well, thank you for your service.
It was an
I
honor to
love it. I love hearing anybody that'll put the cartel away. So that's
yeah,
that's great.
yeah, if you're interested, I did a really, really interesting case, prosecuted an interesting case of police officers who were attached to the FBI. They call them task force officers, and these officers were selling compartmentalized information to the cartel. Things like the date, time, and location of search warrants, names and identities of undercover agents. Very valuable stuff, very dangerous stuff if it gets out. And Judy Miller, famously from the New York Times, who went to prison for refusing to give up her source, Scooter Libby, she actually wrote an article about that case. If you want to check it out, it's
Oh,
called
wow.
it's called "The Mexicanization of American Law Enforcement."
Okay.
She wrote it 20 years ago. Hard to believe. Almost
Yeah.
20.
We'll check that out and put that in the show notes.
Okay.
So tell us, what's your son doing now? Obviously, this has rerouted his life completely. And
Mhm.
in some ways, I believe that everything is divine when these things happen, even if it doesn't feel like that at the time. So what's he up to now? How's his health? And
Well,
what's
as
in
you can
his future?
imagine, for a solid year after he was disqualified, DQ'd, he he dealt with severe side effects, including depression and what am I going to do now kind of thing. And
Mhm.
I don't think many people can understand how cataclysmic it is to lose something like that. And so uh, during that time, about a year or so, he was really struggling, and even the military was struggling. They had no idea what to do with him.
Mhm.
Uh, and eventually they put him into a different program, but he got to stay with aviation, which was good because he got to stay with his friends,
Mhm.
and finished out his service in air combat control or something like that, um, communicating with pilots from the ground.
Okay.
He led a team doing that, and they would build like dynamic landing strips.
Oh.
Not sure exactly what that is in the military, in the Marines, but maybe a form of air traffic control.
Mhm.
And so he did that. He finished it off doing that. But while he was doing that, he went back to a secondary passion that he had, which is training dogs. And he's always loved doing that, and he's always been very good at that. So, as kind of like a side gig, to get his mind off of loss, he began to develop what became his small business, and so he was, helping his other fellow officers out with their dogs, and started to grow on social media. Became pretty good at social media content, training dogs, teaching people how to train dogs. And then I will give the military credit, the Marine Corps credit here. For the last 6 months of his service, he was authorized to enter into a program called SkillBridge, which allows some military members, if you qualify for it, to apprentice in whatever program that business or job vocation that you want to go into. So if you want to be a mechanic, an authorized mechanic shop can bring you on, and you'll be an unpaid apprentice for them for 6 months. You got to do that, and got to train under a few of the top trainers in the world.
Oh,
So,
wonderful.
yeah. So, I mean, he is well connected in that world now. And because he got so good at social media content, he was also training them on how to develop their content. So, the reality for him is he's not, he would not make a good employee, somebody who's could predictably show up to the office every day kind of thing, in large part because of his health. There are days when he just needs to not do things, and he's still getting better, and needs to do more to get better. But so what do you do in life if that's the case? Well, maybe you become an entrepreneur and just make your own way. And that's what he's doing. He's slowly building his professional dog training business. He's got the creds. He's apprenticed with top trainers in the world, a couple of the top trainers in the world. I mean, one guy is the trainer for celebrities in LA. It's just incredible. And he's just going to be his own boss. And he's made it clear, he doesn't care if he's got to sleep out of a van or something. He's not going to ever work for anyone ever again. He's going to make his own way. And I think he's going to be really successful. He's got like 500,000 followers on social media. It's incredible. And yeah, I mean, he's got some videos that are like celebrity level videos. He's got a couple videos of like 30 million views. It's just.
Do you remember his handle?
Yeah, it's on Instagram. It's For the Dogs, just For the
Number
Dogs.
4?
No, FOR.
For the Dogs. Okay, we'll link it.
Yeah. And on TikTok, it's For the Dogs _ He's also on Twitter, on X, but he just doesn't seem to have a lot of growth potential there for some reason. Even though Elon said he wants more positive content, he's slowly growing there. But so you can find him there as well, For the Dogs _ And then from there, you can find everything. He's got a subscription he's working on. People can pay $7 a month for his subscription. And yeah, I think he's going to do well. And he also, this is unbelievable. I think he's going to explode now because Ford just sponsored him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
They're giving him a truck. Unfortunately, it's not one of those big badass trucks. It's a tiny truck. But they're giving him a truck, and they literally told him, it's a Ford Maverick, I think. And they're building it out for him so that he could put crates in the back. And they literally told him, we want you to drive this truck to the ground.
Wow.
And so that's a big deal. Yeah. I mean, I don't know many people that get sponsored by Ford right out of the Marine Corps,
Yeah.
So he's struggling right now. He's living here with me right now, and slowly but surely he's going to develop his empire, doing what he wants to do.
Yeah, good for him. Well, I want to thank you for your service. Thank him for his service. We'll say prayers for his health, that gets back on track. And any final thoughts for people out there that have been derailed by this whole dark days of medicine, that are struggling?
Yeah, I mean, these are profound questions that call for profound answers, and we always struggle to find them. But for me, I think the lesson I learned is we have to take ownership of our health, and not just blindly follow what the quote unquote experts tell us. The so-called expert class betrayed us, and they hurt us. And the entities that should be presumptively trustworthy, CDC, NIH, public health officials, they can't be trusted. It's not even trust but verify. It's sadly, not only did public health take a hit, the entire medical profession took a hit. I lost 3 primary care physicians because I refused to take the shot. I got fired. I had doctors fire me. Can you believe that?
You can come see us.
Huh? I
You can
will.
come.
Why not? But I mean, that's just crazy. Like, how can you fire me? But thankfully, I have the VAs, and they can't fire me. But the other thing I do want to tell you, one more thing about Wes. He's starting a new program that I think is really wonderful. It's slow to get off its feet, but what he's doing is you can look him up. There's been some articles written on him called "Running with Shelter Dogs."
Yes.
USA USA Today did an article on him. Runner's World did an article on him. So he started a nationwide movement called Running with Shelter Dogs. He started it. Other people followed and took credit for it, but he started it. And he started at Camp Lejeune while a Marine officer at Camp Lejeune with the local shelter there. But what he's doing now is he's taking orders, like somebody will say, in order to continue to help shelter dogs while also trying to find a way to make money and a living. He's started a program where if you want a certain kind of dog, he can find it at a shelter for you.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And, I encourage everybody to look at the show notes, go follow them, go follow the story, and tune in next time for another episode of the Dr. Mollie James Show.